We'll give it another minute or two, and
Okay.
then I'll introduce you. Nathan Akers, National Gold Consultants, MBA. I don't
That's
have
right.
to introduce you. It's on the first screen.
It's right there. Yeah, it's right there for you.
Right. So this is like a 4-hour webinar, right?
Correct. Yeah, exactly. No breaks at all. So
What do you have, about 6 slides or no? 25?
Let's see. It's 26 exactly.
Okay.
But you've already seen one of them.
I'm assuming everyone can hear me. We've got new technology going on here. And I'm going to pass this off to Nathan here in a second. Most of the people I see that are on here, I already know and have my phone number. But the best way to get a hold of me, if you want to, if you have questions about this after, or you want more information, or we want to get pricing from Nathan, the pricing changes, pretty much on a daily basis, doesn't it, Nathan?
It certainly does.
So you can call me. It's best to catch me on my cell phone, which is 817-658-5658. And I also have some extra brochures and whatnot that we can send you that Nathan has provided me. All right. So I think most everybody that signed up is on here. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to mute Nathan, and you can go ahead and get going here.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. So my name is Nathan Akers with National Gold Consultants, and just a little bit about us. We are a gold and silver wholesaler that works exclusively through a network of roughly 1,500 advisors throughout the U.S. Every place else that you see on TV or, the internet, the talking heads, they're all retail. They don't have to act in your best interest. We do. And we work exclusively with advisors because we think that gold and silver should be considered as part of your overall portfolio. So today we're going to talk about protecting your wealth and your buying power. And we're going to talk about utilizing gold and silver to do that. So we'll start out by, are you concerned right now? Are you concerned about, inflation, potential recession, what's going on in the government, the, devaluing of the dollar, just the political, environment that we're in right now? And really the reason I ask if you're concerned is because if you're not, you really should be. This is a chart of it's the money supply of the U.S. And you can see how over on the far right, it just goes straight up. And that's because we added roughly $15 trillion to the economy in the last, 2.5, 3 years, which is just this insane amount of money. We hear the word trillion so often that, we don't even, we can't really quantify it anymore. To put it into perspective, 1 million seconds is 11.5 days. A trillion or 1 billion seconds is 36 years and 8 months. And 1 trillion seconds is 36,844 years. So it's this insane amount of money. And it's the underlying cause of why we're seeing, prices just continue to go up on everything. And really the only solution that the government has is, hey, we can either increase in, interest rates, which if we do that, it's going to crash the market. Or we can just, kind of hope that people ignore it and it goes away on its own. And that's never, ever happened. So inflation, what is inflation? We hear it all the time. It's simply the loss of purchasing power. And like this chart shows, the same basket of goods just costs you more money. And we've definitely seen that over the last few years, certainly at the grocery store, at the gas pump. I mean, if anybody has bought eggs recently, that's a great example right there. You never even used to think about the cost of eggs. Now it's like $7 for a dozen. It's ridiculous. And as I mentioned earlier, you see it at the gas pumps, and inflation. When gas prices were $5, $6, $7 a gallon earlier, it's not that it was any better gas that you were putting in your truck. It was the same gas. You're just paying more for it. So your purchasing power, you've got less of it, which is really a shame because, we want to be able to enjoy life. We want to be able to enjoy, friendships, go out to eat, hang out with grandkids, get together as a family, and what I like about this slide is, these poor people, they show what life is really about. It's about those relationships, but they've been so affected by inflation, they can't even have the lights on. They can only have one light, and the rest they've got to use candles. And, unfortunately, that's kind of what we're getting to in some ways. And it's not what we want. Ideally, you should be able to be in your convertible, enjoying retirement, enjoying your free time, just living life without worrying about your purchasing power just going away with really no cause that you did directly. It's this external force that's just not a good thing for you. So what's the solution to all of this? We've heard a lot of kind of doom and gloom so far in the presentation, but what is the solution? And I would say that the solution really is what we call wealth insurance. So it's insuring your overall wealth level, which really, when you get down to it, life is about, it's about our health, it's about our relationships, and it's about money last of all. But we don't really want to have to try and focus on money all the time. And what wealth insurance does is it helps remove that concern. It does it by balancing out your wealth level over time. And we talk about gold and silver acting as wealth insurance, physical gold and silver. And, the reason why is we're going to talk about how it protects us. We'll talk about, what kind, we'll talk about how much, we'll talk about who you should buy from, etc. But as I mentioned earlier, it's wealth insurance. It's this idea of, something to balance out all of your assets that are tied to the dollar. Because right now, for the vast majority of Americans, all of your wealth is tied directly to the dollar, whether it's, cash in a savings account or, money in the stock market or in real estate or in an annuity or in a pension. And if the dollar does poorly and goes down in value, there's nothing on the other side of the seesaw to help maintain that overall wealth level. Instead, you're just seeing your purchasing power go down. You can't enjoy as much of life as you used to be able to. So the solution, that counterweight, is gold and silver. And the reason why we say that gold and silver is that counterweight is because what we've seen throughout history is as the dollar decreases in value, gold and silver appreciate in value. And so it maintains that overall wealth level. Now, the inverse is also true. When you see gold and silver going down in value, it's because the dollar is doing better. So I like to make the audacious statement that, I want you to buy gold and silver and then just watch its value absolutely plummet. Because that just means that the rest of the economy is doing great, the rest of your portfolio is doing great, and you're making money on the other side of the seesaw. So let's talk about US dollar purchasing power and how it's, acted over time. Now, the left side of this chart is 1913. And basically, this is a chart of the dollar's purchasing power since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. And what a lot of people don't realize is the Federal Reserve, it's not a government entity. It's actually privately owned, so they've got their own vested interest. And what we've seen is since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913, the purchasing power of the dollar essentially has just gone into a free fall. Since 1913, we've lost 98% of the dollar's purchasing power. What's really interesting to me on this slide is at the dollar, or at the bottom of the slide, it talks about what a dollar would buy at certain points in time. So over on the far left, back in 1913, for $1, you could buy 30 Hershey's chocolate bars. Today, that would cost you $26.14. And we can just see how the amount of goods, just continues to fall over time, while the dollar is getting diluted because they're just printing and creating more and more out of absolutely thin air. Now, when we talk about gold and silver acting as a hedge to help protect your purchasing power, I think this is a very powerful example of it. Back in 1950, one silver dollar, the value of it, you could buy 10 gallons of gas. Here we are today, 2022, 2023, one silver dollar, you could still buy 10 gallons of gas. And we all know what gas prices have done in the last 70 years. So that just shows how physical silver and physical gold help to maintain that overall purchasing power over time. This isn't about making a ton of money. This is about maintaining your overall wealth level. Now, what we've also seen is that gold and silver has this inverse relationship, not just to the dollar, but also to real estate. So the red line is the value of gold. And we can see, that gold goes up when the green line, which is real estate, tends to go down. There's this almost direct correlation between the two. So I hear a lot of times from a lot of folks, oh, I'm diversified beyond, the stock market. I've got real estate. Well, that's well and good. That's great. But you need something beyond real estate. Let's think about the last, major recession that we had, 2008 to 2011. We saw the stock market free fall, and we saw real estate free fall as well in that same time period. But physical gold and silver, as we can see from this chart, increased rather dramatically over that same period of time. Now, I've mentioned earlier that gold and silver is this counterbalance to real estate, or not to real estate, but to stocks. And what this slide shows is it looks back at the largest declines of the S&P 500 over the last 50 years. And you can see how during every single major market decline, where the S&P was down double digits, physical gold and silver, specifically pre-1933 gold and silver, was up double, if not triple digits. So that's why it's got that inverse relationship. That's why it acts as the counterbalance on the seesaw. Because when the stock market zigs and when real estate zigs, gold and silver zags. And it's important to have the right type of gold and silver. Let's look at 2020, the flash crash that we had at the beginning of COVID, when we saw the S&P fall 31.8%. Well, we saw silver, the spot price of silver, which is essentially the value of silver that's in the ground right now. We saw it plummet 36%, but actual physical pre-1933 silver dollars were up 22.7%. So once again, it's important to have the right type, to have that right right medium, I should say, of how to act as a counterbalance. And I know I've kind of beat this to death, but it's about keeping balance. It's about maintaining your overall wealth level. So how does we've talked about how it protects us. Now let's talk about what kind. I know I mentioned this just briefly earlier, but really the type of gold and silver that we recommend is pre-1933 gold and silver coins. And by pre-1933, I mean coins that were minted by the US government prior to 1933, specifically gold or silver coins. And the reason why that's important is prior to 1933, in just our general circulation, we used gold and silver coins that because the dollar was tied directly to gold. Prior to 1933, the price of gold was fixed at $20 an ounce. Then in early 1933, FDR, under an executive order, confiscated private ownership of gold. So all of those gold coins were supposed to be turned into the federal government, at which point then FDR turned around and revalued gold from $20 to $35 an ounce. It was essentially the very first, great theft of American wealth by the government. He did the same thing with silver in 1934. So the coins that are out there now, through subsequent legislation, Congress basically said, those are going to be a private asset class. There were heavy penalties if you didn't turn those in, but we're going to have don't ask, don't tell. We're going to make it a completely private asset class. So they're not reported anywhere when you buy or when you sell, which means there's never any 1099s issued on them. And these pre-1933 coins, because they are a private asset class, we can only use them in non-qualified transactions that you physically hold. So by that, I mean, your money that's outside of your retirement accounts. Because if you've got a retirement account at all, you've got a third party in there. You've got the IRS, and they want to know what you've got so they can track it and tax it and know where things are at. And we can see how a private asset class wouldn't play very well with that. So for any sort of retirement account that you've got, we're required by law to use the newer post-1933 coins. And those coins, they really are designed primarily for retirement accounts. You see these people online, hawking, new, American Eagles or new, Canadian Maple Leafs to be held physically, but that's really not what they're designed for. So any retirement account asset, any retirement account gold and silver, you can't hold it yourself at home. It's got to be held at a depository. And once again, that's because the IRS wants to be able to know exactly where everything's at. And they want to keep an eye on it for reporting requirements, RMDs, taxes, etc. Now, we've talked about how it protects us and what kind. So let's talk about how much gold and silver, because all we've seen right now is that gold and silver is this counterbalance to the other side of the seesaw. So really the short answer that I give to, how much gold and silver should I own is you need enough to make a difference. You need enough to make an impact. All the time I see people that, have a net worth of, 500,000 in investable assets, and they'll buy $20,000 worth of gold and silver, which sounds great. It sounds like a lot, but when you do the math, it's a 4% allocation, which isn't going to really do very much for you. It'd be like if you had a home worth $500,000 and you decided to insure it for $20,000. Sure, you could say you had homeowners insurance, but if your home was wiped out in a hurricane or a wildfire or something, that 20,000 wouldn't really make a big impact when you were trying to rebuild. So you need enough physical gold and silver that it's going to actually do something. Now, the chart that's on the screen right now is from a report done by the CPM Group. They're a commodities research firm. And basically what they did was they back tested a bunch of portfolios from 1968 to 2020. And they wanted to see what adding gold into a portfolio would do. And what they found was adding any amount of gold to a portfolio increased the average rate of return on that portfolio. And then they looked at the amount of risk. And what they found was adding any amount up to 20% decreased the average amount of risk in that portfolio. So what you want is you want to be able to maximize your total portfolio returns and minimize your total portfolio risk. And when they did this study in 2020, that sweet spot was at a 20% allocation of gold and silver. Interestingly enough, they did the same study back in 2016, and at the time they found that an 18% allocation maximized the average rate of return and minimized the average amount of risk in the portfolio. Now, we typically don't recommend a 20% allocation for individuals because if you've never been exposed to gold and silver, that can be a pretty large allocation, just straight out of the chute. We typically talk about a 10 to 15% allocation to physical gold and silver because that 10 to 15% protects the other 85 to 90% of your portfolio. It acts as that counterbalance on the seesaw. So we've talked about how it protects us. We've talked about how much, and I know I've gone pretty quickly through all of that, but let's talk about from whom. So I mentioned earlier, you can buy gold and silver from a number of places. You could go down to the local gold guys. The problem with that is most of the, really all of the other gold and silver dealers that you're going to run across, they're not fiduciaries. They don't have to act in your best interest. And so what we've seen, unfortunately, time and time again, is individuals that have gone to a place like that, or they go online and they find it, just a random retailer. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is a couple of things. One, they'll get put into obscure products that really don't have any real value. And two, a lot of the online dealers actually, they've got two main profit centers. One is going to be selling you gold and silver at overinflated prices. And the second is they sell off your information. Now, one thing about National Gold Consultants is we are big believers in privacy. It's, in our DNA. We will never contact you after, a point of sale. We'll never solicit you. We'll never sell off your information. So we think that we are the premier spot to buy gold and silver because we do partner exclusively with advisors. We do have to act in your best interests. And we do give you the best advice. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Kevin. I know that was really quick, but I'd love to open it up for questions if anybody has any, and just go over any additional information that you might want to know.
I'm not exactly sure how they ask questions. If you can open up, if they have an open mic, I'm not sure that they do.
Let's see. I just enabled public chat.
There you go.
So I know you can type in the chat box. Otherwise, one thing that does come to mind, two questions that come up a fair amount. One is going to be, okay, so I've got this metal, how does it come to me? Does it take up a ton of space? Because I think the common conception is, oh, I'm buying $100,000 of gold and silver. Like when that gets delivered, they're going to have to back the Brinks truck up to my house and be unloading the metals for hours. And the reality is, let's say you did a 50-50 split between gold and silver. Well, $50,000 of silver can fit into a medium shoebox. $50,000 of gold I can easily hold in the palm of my hands. The other part of it is actually how those coins get delivered. Everything that we send out goes out via FedEx Express. The coins are tubed, they're double boxed, so they're put in one box, then that box is wrapped with strapping tape, which is like packing tape on steroids. Then that box is put into another one, also wrapped in strapping tape. It all goes out via FedEx Express with signature required on delivery, and there's nothing on the outside of the box to indicate that it's gold and silver. So it looks like we've got a question in here. What's the current value of pre-1933 gold and silver? And where do we go for the trend of values over the last 10 years or so? So the way to get the current value is really to talk to Kevin or to talk to me. So right now, pre-1933 silver dollars are around $37.50 a piece. Pre-1933 gold coins are around $680 a piece. And the trend of values over the last 10 years, they've been going up over the last 10 years. As we've seen the dollar fall in value, we've seen pre-1933 gold and silver values rise. One thing that I do encourage people or, to kind of think about, instead of thinking about physical gold and silver as like a stock where, hey, I'm going to go online and track the value all the time. Think about it as a hard asset, like your home, for instance. Sure, you could go online to, Zillow or, another one of those sites and get an idea of what your home is worth. But until that transaction actually closes, you don't know for certain. One thing that we can certainly do is give you an idea of what your coins are worth at any point in time. And we've got a number of clients that will do that for, periodically throughout the year. The next part of it is, liquidation. I should mention that because liquidation is a very important part of owning gold and silver. This is an asset class that, you should be able to take advantage of when prices spike or when you need a little bit of liquidity. And we're big believers in that. There are never any chargebacks. One of the things about pre-1933 coins is they're not making any more of them. So the supply of them is limited, which means that if somebody wants to liquidate, we definitely want to buy that back. And we never charge any fees on the back end. We don't take any haircuts. Because we think that people should have complete liquidity. As far as liquidating goes, it's easy as letting Kevin know or letting myself know. And our liquidation department will send you out detailed instructions on exactly how to get those coins back to us. And then as soon as they're here, we cut a check and that'll be in your hands within a week. So it's pretty simple and straightforward.
Hey, Nathan.
Yeah.
Do you want to give the number to your switchboard in case somebody wanted to call you direct and get a price today or whatever?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So my direct number is 763-325-4200.
Hey, Nathan. It's going to be 78 degrees here. What's it like up there in Minnesota?
Hey, Kevin, it's snowing right now, and it snowed overnight, and I hate winter right now. So,
well, you can call us in August and tell us it's 75 and beautiful, right? When it's
exactly.
Chris has another question here. Do you see it?
Yes, I do. Coins not insurable, presumably, and best to keep holdings confidential. So there's two parts of that. I encourage people to keep their holdings confidential. Nobody knows that you've got these besides, Kevin and ourselves. And, I encourage people to not go around, talking about, hey, I've got $250,000 of gold and silver at home. It's just, use some discretion there. Store it in a home safe and, old paint cans in the basement, or, even in a safety deposit box if you really, feel like doing that. You can insure them. I have a number of folks that I've got a few individuals that I know that have added riders to their insurance policy, their homeowner's insurance policy. I'm not a big proponent of that just because of it's not confidential then. You're just introducing more people. So the next question that came in general, pre-1933 coins are worth more than the spot price of silver and gold. Great question. Yes, in general, any physical gold and silver is going to be worth more than the spot price of gold and silver. The analogy that I use on this is, think of the spot price of gold and silver as the value of gold and silver that's in the ground right now. So that's the, kind of the background behind it. Now, think about if I wanted to buy my wife a dozen roses. She's long suffering. She definitely deserves them. Kevin should definitely do this. So I could go down to the florist and I could buy a dozen roses for what, 50, 60 bucks now. Or I could go down the street to a nursery and buy a packet of seeds for just a few dollars. And that difference in price isn't that I got ripped off. It's that somebody's, planted those seeds, watered them, tended them, harvested them. So whether I'm buying roses today, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, I'm always going to pay more for fresh cut roses than for the seeds. And it's the same thing with metals. To get that metal out of the ground, somebody's got to mine it, refine it, melt it down, mint the coins, ship it, insure them, all of that. So physical gold and silver is always going to sell for more than spot price. I tell people spot price is really, it really means nothing. It can give you an idea of what's going on in the market, but physical coins move differently. And that slide that I showed earlier, because spot price is really it's the value of metal that's in the ground, but how we see it represented is in gold and silver futures. And the amount of futures that are traded every day. Well, first of all, roughly 99% of gold and silver futures don't settle in physical form. And so because of that, the amount of gold and silver futures that are traded every single day is equal to the amount of metal that's mined in the entire world in the 2-year period. So because they're traded in the market, they tend to get jerked around with the rest of the market. And that's why on that slide earlier, we saw in the COVID flash crash, we saw the market in general, the S&P was down 31.6% and spot price was down, 36%. But we saw physical pre-33 coins up 22% at that same time. Couple of things that popped up in here: fees, percentage of amount purchased. Yeah, great question. So essentially the fees on the front end, we charge, it's a 6% markup from our cost of acquisition to what we sell the coins for. And some of that 6% goes to Kevin. And then a little bit of it covers shipping, insurance, and our overhead. and that compares to just in general in the industry, most places their markups are anywhere from 20 to 30%. And that's the only time that we make money off the transaction. And then Don had, kind of a comment about the possible change to digital currency by this administration. And that is completely off the subject, but I will address it because I think it's fascinating. So, this whole idea of a central bank backed digital currency, we've seen it tried throughout the world. There are numerous countries that are already rolling this out. And my own personal belief is that we will end up going to that as a nation. The problem with it is that as the Fed has proposed it right now, instead of the banks actually holding the quote unquote cash as a asset on their balance sheets, it's held at the Fed. It's just it gets incredibly messy. Essentially, think of like a complete lack of privacy, access to lending, all of that, essentially controlled by the government. And we all know how great and nonpartisan our current administration is, and how they definitely want people to be able to express themselves and all of that. So long and the short of it, I think that how that will affect gold and how it's going to affect both gold and silver, I think that throughout this year, we're going to see gold and silver rise pretty substantially. The spot price of silver right now is like in the low 20s, 21, 22. I think that we'll easily see that hit $30 by the end of the year. So we'll see, roughly a 50% return on that. Obviously, there's a bunch of things that could change that if we have a recession. Then I think that that's on a market crash. Excuse me, I should say that I think that we'll see that, go much higher than that. Same with, depending upon what Russia ends up doing with Ukraine. Okay.
So I've got Dana here with me, and she wants to know if you store your coins in a depository rather than in your own safe, does the government know about that?
No.
Okay. The other question is, if somebody has pre or post 1933 coins, like those Americans or polar bear coins or Canadian maple leafs, what?
Yep.
Will you trade those in for pre 1933, and how do you do that?
Yeah, we will. And it's a completely private transaction. It's think of it, there's no paper trail involved. Think of it like going to the bank and, switching out 520s for $100 bill. There isn't any record kept of it.
So somebody asked a question, it might have been Chris, about whether you should insure the coins and that and the other. Don't tell anybody this, but when we first bought our first batch from you, they were sitting in the middle shoebox on the top of Karen's closet. And then when we bought the second batch, she said, "This is ridiculous. We need to get a safe." So the best thing to do is to get a safe. We had one client out in Tyler, Texas, that she said, "Well, where do I get a safe?" They sell them at Walmart. I mean, I'm sure you can probably get a better safe somewhere, but this client bought a safe at Walmart just to bolt down in the bottom of her closet for like $225. So as far as the storage is concerned, we are no longer in a shoebox. And the safes are not that expensive.
Yep. And then Chris, I just saw your question about comparison of the holding of physical coins versus a fund backed by coins. So to me, this is as simple as at the beginning of the COVID crisis, when you couldn't find toilet paper anywhere, would you rather have had a certificate good for a big multi-pack of toilet paper or had the toilet paper at home? I know which one I would choose. So to me, it's the different, if you have the fund, you don't know that you've actually got it, is the problem. And most of those funds, you look at like GLD, or SLV, the large ETFs, and most of those funds are highly leveraged. And what they're buying gold and silver futures. So really, like GLD, last I looked, it was leveraged out 200 to 1. So you think you're buying gold, but really you're buying a piece of paper of gold. And that gold happens, that piece of paper happens to be owned by 200 other people. Yeah, it's personal preference, but I like actually knowing that I've got it, that whole possession being 9/10 of the law. Agree. Moving to an IRA backed by gold doesn't result in the tax hit. Right. So you can buy physical gold and silver in an IRA. It just has to be held at a depository. You don't have to buy a gold and silver fund to use IRA funds. And that's something that Kevin, yeah. Oh, that is, man, you're just like teeing these up for me, Kevin. It's incredibly dangerous because the IRS has said, yeah, you can't do that. In fact, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about a year ago at this point, of a couple that ended up going to tax court. They had done exactly that with $500,000 that they took out of their IRA. They bought American Eagles with them. And then they basically, you open an LLC. The LLC holds the coins, but you can store them at home, is what people say. And the IRS basically, in tax court, it was ruled, nope, that counts as a distribution. And so now you've got that entire 500,000 that counts as income from the year that you did that transaction. Oh, and penalties and interest on top of it. It's just a mess. I wouldn't mess with that at all.
Okay, so the last thing that I want to say is we've had an awful lot of people were asking us about Roth conversions and, can you do that with gold and silver? Look, it's Karen and I believe that, I think as most people are listening, that taxes are not going to go down, right? So whether you're buying gold and silver, whatever you're doing, you have to pay the tax. But if you take IRA money and you pay some of the tax, people on this call that's already done that, you pay the tax, which taxes are on sale right now. Now you have physical and gold and silver in your safe or in a depository, right, that nobody knows about. You've gotten the tax out, and now you have that balance that Nathan was talking about. Anything else, Nathan?
That is it, Kevin.
All right, let's wrap it up. If anybody wants to talk to me, I think everybody on here has my number, but I'll give my mobile again. It's 817-658-58, and or you can call Nathan direct and get their interested in buying direct. All right. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you, Nathan, so much, everybody.
You're welcome.
Here, and I'm going to go ahead and end this now.
Thanks, Kevin.
Okay, bye-bye.